Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we are going to have a little chat about rumours, just general rumours, and this is brought on by the fact that I got quite a few messages this morning and a few last night asking about a picture of some Terminators. Very blurry picture of some Terminators, which you can see here somewhere. I'll stick them on the screen so you can take a look. And it was conjectured, it was suggested that perhaps these are new Primaris Terminators. That finally they're getting their Terminator equivalents, just sort of bigger, upgraded versions of what we already have. And what did I think? Is going to do a video, going to talk about it, and really, to be honest, the first thing I thought was, well, it just looks like two pictures of Terminators taken at weird angles. The perspective is a bit odd, and they seem a bit flat. It seemed more like either like a CG model for something, or like an illustration. They didn't really look too actual like physical model like. I don't know, they seemed very flat and it just didn't strike me as being anything. It just looked like two blurry pictures of Terminators and that was pretty much it. And so I didn't talk about it. I didn't make a video about it. Instead I did what I normally do when I get sent something that's a bit outrageous, I guess, and I go to the usual people who have given me information that's been good in the past, and I've gone and I say, hey, I've been told this. Do you have any idea about this? Have you heard anything? And I wait to hear back. Is generally how I do it. If I get nothing back in the way of affirmative stuff, then I will just leave it and I won't talk about it. And if I get something back that suggests that perhaps something like that could be accurate, could be true, or that if it's like a multi-layered thing. Okay, well, they've not heard of this bit, but this bit they do know something about, then I'll pass it on to you guys. With this thing, I didn't even get a chance to get an answer from anyone. I'd sent them the pictures when, I'm assuming you've seen this, do you have any ideas? And before anyone even had the chance to get back to me, it turns out that the initial gut instinct of, well, it just looks like two pictures of Terminators was absolutely correct, because it was exactly two pictures of Terminators. That is all it was. Not just two pictures of Terminators, it was two photographs of two illustrations of Terminators from the Space Hulk card game, I believe. So, far and away from being new Primaris Terminators, it's just very old drawings of Terminators. They didn't even change the background, they just took a picture, blurred the hell out of it, threw it on some 40k Discord somewhere and went Primaris, and that was the entire thing by the look of things. But it did make me think about the way we approach rumours as a whole, and how I try and approach them on this channel, because I try very hard, firstly, not to just pass on everything I'm sent. If I passed on everything that I was sent, then the chances are you would get sick of it real quick, because I get something new like easily 2 or 3 times a week, and a lot of it is, no disrespect to the people sending it to me, just doesn't ring true at all. And it can be anything, like in terms of sources, there are people that I know who have a reliable source, either it be it themselves or they have someone that they speak to that they're able to pass the information on to me. Then there are people who just see a random thing, see a random comment on a random forum and go, oh, maybe that's something, and pass it along, and everything in between. There's even the occasional instance, I mean, one of my favourite non-rumour rumours was someone who sent me a link to a post on Bolter and Chainsword where a guy said that his personal rumour for 9th was that they were going to squat Grey Knights. And they said, have you heard anything about this? And I went, no, not even slightly, but what does he mean personal rumour? And it was clarified that he'd not heard it anywhere, he just said it. Now, that technically, if you go like one stage removed, is a rumour. It's just not based in anything. It's just a random speculation that's been presented as something that could happen. And that's where things get tricky, and that's where I try really hard not to just throw everything I hear out, because a lot of it could fall under that sort of broad category of someone says something, but they don't have any sort of source or backup or any sort of indication as to where it has come from. Stuff like that, generally speaking, I try not to throw over to you guys. I will try and get some sort of corroboration first. I'll try and get some sort of affirmative answer as to whether this is or is not either not accurate. I'm not going to use the term accurate, but whether this is something that other people have heard who move in sort of similar circles, I guess, or whether this is something that seems like it could be reasonable. An example of that is actually a few things that have turned out to be true relatively recently. A new Ghazghkull, Space Wolves vs. Orcs box, and a new Illuminor Xerath. Now, I got all of that information from the one person. Now, this one person had never sent me anything before. They told me how they got their information. I was happy with how they got their information, and I did a quick check. I didn't just go, okay, sure, let's go. I verified a couple of things first. I reached out to people who have been accurate before, and I said, hey, have you heard anything about this, this, and this? Now, interestingly, Illuminor Xerath was the thing that really no one else had heard anything about. No one else had made any comment on or suggested, and it was a surprise to them as well. I nearly didn't put it in the video that I did talking about Space Wolves vs. Orcs, new Ghazghkull, Illuminor Xerath, 9th edition, all of that stuff. I nearly left it out because there wasn't really anything to support it, other than this person had heard it at the same time as hearing this other stuff too. But the thing is, the other stuff was corroborated by at least one other person who had already given me decent info in the past, and so I left it. And funnily enough, over the weekend, we got shown a new Illuminor Xerath, which meant that rumour was completely true. Bearing in mind, this is November of last year I made that video. And of course, other things from that particular drop of information has turned out to be correct. We do have a new Ghazghkull. We do have a Space Wolves vs. Orcs box. Admittedly, the context of it is not the same. The context of it is actually incorrect, because the context was that it would be a new box for 9th/8.5th edition, given that 9th is not supposed to be a completely new thing, it's instead just a tightening up and slight reworking of 8th, essentially. That's turned out to be wrong, but the actual box itself has turned out to be right, which is another thing where a lot of this stuff gets very confusing and very difficult to work out how much I should pass on or how much you should believe when you read and hear stuff like this. Sometimes the actual meat of the thing could be totally accurate, but the stuff around it is wrong. A Space Wolves vs. Orcs box is completely correct. The actual setting of it is not correct. And so where does that leave you? Well, it kind of leaves you in the position of that rumour turned out to be partially true. I think it's very easy to overlook the partial side of things as well. When it comes to this stuff, there is a genuine series of steps that I do before I pass it on to you guys, but I think is good for everyone to do, which is to firstly just assume that nothing you read is going to be... Nothing is true until it's proven to be true. I try and make it relatively clear without kind of overly labouring the point that when I say I believe something could be true, that doesn't mean that it is. That just means that it sounds like it could be accurate. It sounds like this could be something that we do see. I don't try and make it sound as though it's something we will definitely encounter. In fact, I try very hard not to do that, because I don't want to give people false hope over something that doesn't turn out to be correct. When it comes to rumours as a whole, it's a case of looking at it in a couple of different ways. I think firstly, from the standpoint of, I would like this to be the case, but I'm not going to believe it until I see it. I think that's the most important thing, by far. I think it's a case of, even if it's something that you look at and go, oh hell yes, I 100% want that, give me that right now, that would be awesome. I'm going to believe it because I want to believe it. No matter how much you want to believe it, the best thing to do is to not. The best thing is to simply say, okay, that would be great if it was accurate. If it is, congratulations, you have got a nice, wonderful surprise, because the thing you really like the idea of, you now have. If you go for the option of, I want it to be true, therefore I will believe that it's true, when it invariably doesn't happen, or inevitably, you've reached the one point where actually this one rumour turns out was total scrollux, that is going to feel kind of gutting. That's where the time aspect comes in as well. It's a case of, for me, looking at it and deciding whether it is in any way believable and whether it matches previous patterns of release and whether it can be corroborated by someone else. Then there's the timescale thing. I much prefer rumours that have a distinct timescale. That say, in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, even in the next year, we will see. Because otherwise it's so open-ended that it could happen 8 years down the line and you could go, I told you so. It was beginning to feel a little bit like that with, again, Ghazghkull and Orcs versus Space Wolves, because I passed that information on to you guys, asked you guys what you thought, and then nothing. Nothing for a good number of months. Nothing until April of 2020 for Illuminor Zeraz. That is quite a long time to wait to find out whether something is or is not true. Time is a massive part of it because it's very easy to look at something and go, well, I mean, yeah, that's probably true. That is probably true. It would be silly to say that it's not true, but it's not going to happen for five or 6 years. Like, I've had stuff, like, sent to me. I've had information told to me and gone, I can't pass that on because that could literally be from now until the heat death of the universe. That is the timescale we're looking at in terms of what that statement is. There's like, we're going to get a new Dark Eldar Codex. Yeah, we are. At some point in the future, we are going to get one. That statement by itself doesn't constitute anything. That's the other thing. Whether the actual rumour itself constitutes new information or whether it's something that should just be assumed to be true. Good example of that was when Spiky Bits did a big old... Was it Spiky Bits or Battle Lost Souls? They're both shit. Like when they... One of them, I don't know, whichever one it was, did an article that was like, new Space Marine heroes coming? Like new Space Marine characters? Are we going to see more Primaris characters? I think there's some on the way. Of course we are. It's not a rumour. That's not information. That's not a leak. That is just a standard. That's just a fact. Like that's nothing to speculate about. That's nothing to kind of look at and go, okay, well, how does that relate to previous? Well, because of course there's going to be more Primaris characters. They're not going to make one. Primaris is getting a shed load of attention. It continues to get a shed load of attention, and it will endlessly. The idea of them getting to a certain number of characters and then going, no, we're done now. Don't be ridiculous. Of course there's going to be more. It's a case of all these really arbitrary and weird factors coming together. It's a case of, does it look like it could be true compared to what we already know? Can it be corroborated by anyone? Does it have a reasonable time scale? Are we talking within the next year? Because if we're talking sometime by the year 2030, that's not good enough because that doesn't mean anything. Like, literally anything could be true in that time frame. You have no idea what's going to happen in 9 years' time, and no. And is it blatantly obvious? Like, blatantly obvious stuff, I just don't pass on. I don't pass on because there's no point. Like, what are you going to do with the information that at some point during the next edition we're most likely going to see another Gene Stealer Cults book? I mean, what are you going to do with that? You're just going to go, yeah, and... What's in it? Can't tell you that. Any named characters? Nope, can't tell you that. Are we going to see the same units or it's going to be expanded? I don't know, but I can tell you there's going to be a book. There's always going to be a book. At some point there's always going to be a new book. It's just a totally pointless rumour. I don't know. It's just the very, like, the quick kerfuffle of this Terminator thing really hammered home to me how careful you need to be around what you choose to believe, how careful you need to be when it comes to accepting information from people that, you know, you can't guarantee, like, how true it is. You have to wait and see. But the nature of the beast is that you have to wait and see whether it's accurate. You can't make that call. You can make the call that you think it could be. You can make the call that it seems reasonable. You can make the call that it would be a good idea if we did get the thing. But until you see the thing, it's always just going to be a rumour. And when we say, like, every time, because I say it, I know Valrak says it, I know, like, every site in existence says it, when it comes to taking it with a pinch of salt, that's not just being said as a disclaimer, as a, well, I'm telling you to take it with a pinch of salt so that when it turns out to be incorrect, you can't look at me and go, you were wrong, because it's not a case of trying to absolve yourself of the responsibility of passing on information that wasn't correct, especially when in the vast majority of cases it is not being passed on as something that's correct. It's merely being passed on as something to talk about and try and make your own judgment call on. It's also to remind you that it could well turn out to be utter drivel, and we will have no way of knowing until a specific time that we can't even give you the right scale of. You don't know. You're going to have to wait for it to either be disproved in the case of the Terminator pictures, or be proved, sometimes months down the line in the case of Illuminor Zeraz, Space Wolves vs. Orcs, Ghazghkull, all of that. It's just an interesting side to the hobby. It's an interesting side to the community, and it's an interesting kind of thing that I like to talk about, and I like speculating about, and I like looking at. But it's also so flaky, so unreliable. It's even someone who has been correct a bunch of times can be wrong. I mean, just to close out as an example of that, we talked about a while ago, like the order of the supplements that were going to come out for the Space Marine Codex. I did an initial video talking about it, laying out the order of it, and that was correct. I then did a retraction. I issued another video talking about how that order had been changed, and it hadn't. The original was true. The person who sent me that information to begin with was accurate first time round. They got everything spot on. But then they switched it up. They'd heard otherwise. They'd heard different things that contradicted what they'd already said, and they said, okay, I was wrong about this first lot. It's actually this order. Even someone who is accurate down to the pairings and the kind of order of release can then turn out to be incorrect by factors that are not in my control, not in your control as someone, watching a video about that rumour. It is entirely a gamble all the way through. It's a fun gamble. It's an interesting gamble, and it's a genuinely fascinating thing to talk about, gamble, but it is a gamble nonetheless. From the first stage of, hearing about it for the first time, to trying to corroborate it, to talking about it, to sharing it, and then to finding out whether or not it's accurate to begin with. It is all completely up in the air. As long as I think we remember that when we talk about all this stuff, it's fine. It's just important not to forget that, really. As I think a few people probably did with this Terminator stuff. So I saw people getting genuinely excited about a picture of some old-ass cards with Terminators on them. It just turns out to be a nothing. That went on for way longer than I meant it to. So what's new? Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think of all of that in the comments down below. And feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video, subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to. And as always, there's an affiliate link for Element Games in the description, where if you buy something, I get something for saying it that way. It's a nice way to support the channel because you needed hobby supplies and various other things anyway. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.